Snow hammered the boarded cabin as the boy clutched his warped sketchbook. So why did the lighthouse in it still shine? The first thing Eric Dalton lost in the storm was the horizon. One minute there was a dark line of pines and a faint smear of the Penobscot out past the county road. The next, the nor'easter rolled in like a white wall and swallowed everything. Snow whipped across his windshield sideways. The wipers thumped on high, useless. He'd been a patrol officer in Penobscot County for 14 years, long enough to read winter, but this one was mean. It howled around the cruiser, buried tire tracks in seconds, knocked out power from Bangor down through the lake towns. Dispatch was already on backup generators. Unit 3, we lost Ridgefield Line. You still out on Millinocket Spur? Came the staticky voice. Yeah, Eric said, eyes squinting for mile markers he couldn't see. Visibility's trash. I'll swing north and check the hunting cabins. If we've got anyone sheltering, it won't be with heat. Copy. Watch for downed hinds. He clicked off, jaw tight. Nights like this made him think of the call from 5 winters back. The one he hadn't been able to reach in time. Old farmhouse, faulty space heater, a woman and her dog. He'd found them too late. Wind like tonight's always brought that memory up like a bruise. He turned off the county road onto a narrow track usually used in October by guys in orange vests. Now it was a tunnel of white. Tree limbs scratched the cruiser. The radio hissed. Then, through the veil of snow, his headlights hit something that shouldn't have been there. A cabin. Shuttered. Low. Its porch half buried. The kind of hunting cabin you could rent for a week in deer season. Except there was light. No, not light, he corrected himself. A flicker. A moving shadow through boards. Eric pulled in close, left the engine idling for heat, and grabbed his flashlight and parka. The wind punched him when he opened the door. Snow knifed through the gap, stinging his face. He hunched his shoulders and slogged to the porch, boots sinking. Penobscot County Sheriff's Office, he called. Even though he was municipal, not county. People recognized sheriff faster than Bangor PD this far out. Anyone inside? No answer. But the shadow moved again. He tried the handle. Locked. Odd. Most of these places were left with a simple latch. This had a heavy new padlock over a hasp. His beam traced it. The metal was on the outside. Someone wanted this door to stay shut from out here. Storm or no storm, that was wrong. He stepped to the window, peered between boards. Inside was dim, lit only by his flashlight's slice. A narrow bed. Crates. A small figure curled against the far wall, knees to chest, arms around something. A kid. Adrenaline cleared the cold from his blood. Eric slammed his shoulder against the door once, testing. Solid. He could have radioed for backup, but in this weather, no ambulance would make it here in less than half an hour. And a child locked in a cold cabin could tip to hypothermia quick. Hang on, buddy, he called through the boards. I'm going to get you out. Snow roared around him. He went back to the cruiser, popped the trunk, and pulled out the short pry bar he kept for stuck doors in winter. Back on the porch, he wedged it under the hasp, leaned hard. The wood groaned, screws tearing. He gave it another heave. The hasp ripped free and the door blew inward with the wind. Cold air rushed in, swirling old dust and the smell of kerosene that had burned out. He stepped inside, pulling the door tight behind him to cut the gale. Hey, it's okay. I'm Officer Dalton. I'm here to help. The boy couldn't have been more than 9. Pale, freckles across his nose, hair too long and shaggy like no one had cut it in months. He wore a gray thermal shirt and sweatpants, both clean but thin. His socks were mismatched. He was barefoot on the boards. His lips were blue-edged, but what Eric noticed first was what the kid clung to, a sketchbook. Thick, water-warped edges rippled like it had been soaked and dried in front of a stove. He had it pressed to his chest like it was the last warm thing on earth. The flashlight beam must have scared him. The boy threw his arm up, turning away from the light, body curling tighter. "Easy," Eric said, softening his tone. He dimmed the beam, bounced it off the ceiling instead. "No spotlights, I get it. You're safe now. Let me look at you." The kid's eyes darted. Gray-blue, wide. He didn't answer. "How long you been here?" Eric asked, scanning the room. A propane heater stood cold in the corner. Pantry shelves were strangely tidy. Canned soups, crackers, peanut butter, all recent brands. Not some old hunter's leftovers. Someone had stocked this for him. A plastic gallon of water half full. A neatly folded extra blanket. Whoever locked him in hadn't meant to kill him. They'd meant to keep him. Eric crouched to the boy's level, moving slow. "It's freezing. I've got heat in the car. Hospital's 10 minutes if the roads hold. Can you walk?" The boy didn't move. He clutched the sketchbook tighter. "Is that yours?" Eric nodded at it. "You draw?" A flicker of something, pride, moved over the kid's face, gone in a breath. "I like to draw too," Eric lied easily. "Not well. My daughter used to say my horses look like lumpy dogs." His daughter, Morgan, college now in Portland. He let the thought of her soften his features. Kids read faces faster than words. He reached out a gloved hand. "Come on. It's warmer out there." The boy hesitated, then scooted toward him on his rear, never loosening his grip on the book. When Eric took his arm, the skin under the thin sleeve was chilled, but not icy. Good. He wasn't in shock yet. Outside, the storm screamed again, trying to shove them off the porch. Eric tucked the boy against his side, shielding him. Hustled him to the cruiser. He got him in the passenger seat, cranked the heat, and turned the vents toward him. The boy flinched when the overhead light came on. "Too bright?" Eric snapped it off. Only the dash lights glowed faint green. "Okay, dim's fine," he radioed. "Dispatch, this is Dalton. I've got a male juvenile, approximately 9 years old, found secured inside cabin off Millinocket Spur. Conscious, cold, possibly neglected. I'm en route to Pine River Medical. Advise hospital." "Copy, Dalton." Pine River notified as he pulled back onto the snow-packed track. The boy's small fingers, red from the cold, worked the cover of the sketchbook open. Pages fanned, swollen from past water. Eric caught a glimpse. Lighthouses. Page after page. Some sloppy, some precise, all with one thing the boy had shaded carefully. The beam. A bright cone, sometimes sweeping across dark water, sometimes cutting through snow like tonight's. On one page, written in a child's uneven hand, a single word had bled outward when the paper got wet. Winter Point. Eric's mind ticked. Winter Point Light had been decommissioned before he graduated high school. Standing on an icy cliff outside Bangor, overlooking the Penobscot Bay. Locals used to sneak up there. Then the state fenced it. Only maintenance crews and, lately, some private security had access. "What's your name, buddy?" Eric asked, eyes flicking between the road and the kid. "You from Bangor? Old Town? You got folks?" The boy stared at the drawing like he could disappear into it. Eric tried again, gentler. "You like lighthouses?" "I used to take my girl up to Winter Point. That one mean something to you?" The boy's throat bobbed. No sound came. "Okay," Eric said, not pushing. "We'll figure it out at the hospital." They got warm blankets and hot cocoa. You ever had Martha's cocoa? She's going to spoil you at the name. The boy's eyes lifted, searching Eric's face as if the word tugged on some half memory. He didn't speak, but his fingers, still trembling from the cold, slid to one fresh page. With a care that told Eric this was a ritual, the boy reached for an imaginary pencil he didn't have. Eric glanced at his glove box, at the stubby cedar pencils he kept for crash forms. He almost pulled one out, but the road curved, and through the white curtain of snow he saw blue and red lights flicker ahead at the highway entrance. Pine River's ambulance had somehow beaten him. He eased to a stop, blinkers ticking loud in the cab. 2 EMTs in heavy parkas rushed over, opening the passenger door. Warm air spilled out. "What have we got?" the older one asked. "Male 9 found locked inside a cabin," Eric said. "Cold exposure, responsive, not talking. Clings to that sketchbook like it's oxygen. Someone stocked that cabin and bolted it from the outside." The EMT leaned in. "Hey, kiddo, we're going to take you in, all right?" The boy shrank from the floodlights, trying to shield his face with the sketchbook. Eric stepped closer, lowered his voice. "They're okay. I'll ride behind. You keep that book with you." The boy looked up at him, then truly looked, as if weighing whether this man was another lock or a key. Snow swirled under the ambulance lights. Somewhere behind them, the dark woods hid a cabin with a torn hasp and a pantry too neat. Whoever had been using it would come back and find an empty bed. And Eric, watching the kid get lifted into the ambulance, realized he'd just pulled a thread in someone else's secret. The ER doors hissed open, spilling the smell of antiseptic and wet wool. Eric followed the stretcher inside, snow still crusting his shoulders. The hospital was running on generator lights. Half the town was dark from the storm, so the hallways glowed in amber backup power. The boy's small hand never left the sketchbook, even as an orderly tried to take it. "It stays," Eric said. "He's calmer when it's with him." The orderly hesitated, then nodded. Nurse Martha Green met them at Bay 3, clipboard under one arm, curls frizzed from the humidity. She was mid-50s, steady-eyed, the kind of nurse who could lower a heart rate with tone alone. "What have you got, Officer Dalton?" "Male, around 9, found locked inside a cabin off Millionaire Spur. No ID, no shoes. Vitals cold but stable." Martha leaned over the boy. "Sweetheart, I'm Martha. We're just going to check your temperature, all right?" The boy recoiled when the curtain rings scraped on the rail. The metallic sound made him flinch hard enough to bang his elbow against the gurney side. "Whoa, easy," Eric murmured. Martha's eyes narrowed. That wasn't startle from cold. That was conditioning. She dimmed the bay light. "Let's keep the blinds closed," she told another nurse. "Too much brightness might trigger him." Eric frowned. "Trigger?" "Dark room reflex," Martha said quietly. "See how his pupils don't constrict? He's used to low light. Someone's kept him in a shaded space for a while." Eric looked at the boy again, hair hanging over his eyes, fingers tracing the edge of the sketchbook as though counting it. The page under his thumb was a lighthouse beam cutting through black waves. The doctor came, took quick vitals, started a warming blanket, and left to sign charts. When the room emptied, Martha set a cup of cocoa on the tray table. "They always drink better if it's chocolate." The boy didn't reach for it. Eric crouched beside him. "Hey, bud. You hungry?" Nothing. Just a slow drag of his finger over the drawing, back and forth like a tide. Eric slid a cedar pencil from his pocket, laid it on the tray. "Thought you might want this back." For the first time, the boy moved with purpose. He lifted the pencil, hesitated, then began to draw. Small strokes, delicate, the shape of a tower spiraling up. When he shaded the beam, his hand steadied. Martha whispered, "He's communicating." Eric watched. "Yeah, but with who?" The boy paused, looked up at him, then at the beam on the page. His lips parted, dry. A faint sound came, more breath than word. "El..." Eric leaned closer. "Say that again." The boy blinked, eyes on the drawing. "El... light." "Light?" Eric echoed. He nodded once, uncertain, as if testing the word after years underwater. Martha smiled gently. "Light's good, honey. You can draw all the light you want." She turned to Eric. "We'll keep him overnight for observation. If you file a protective custody notice, CPS will start intake in the morning." "I'll handle it," Eric said, "but I want to know who locked that door." Pantry was stocked. Someone's been resupplying that cabin. Martha's expression tightened. "That stretch of woods? Only property out there is old ranger land and the decommissioned lighthouse trail." He nodded toward the sketchbook. "Winter Point Light." "Ring a bell?" Her face changed. Recognition, then worry. "I used to volunteer there years ago, back before they fenced it off. A woman named Nora Carver worked the preservation fund." Sweet woman. Had a little boy who drew pictures for the donors. Eric's pulse kicked. "You remember his name?" "Liam. Liam Carver." He looked back at the kid, pencil still moving, beam widening across the page. "Could this be him?" Martha exhaled slowly. "If it is, his mom ran from something bad. She told me once she was afraid of her ex. Said he was law enforcement. Wouldn't tell me where she was going, just packed a car and disappeared." Eric absorbed that. A mother on the run, a boy hidden in a cabin, someone with enough training to bolt a door from the outside and wipe reports. He straightened. "I'll check the old incident logs." Maybe something slipped through before they sealed the case. Martha touched his sleeve. "Be careful, Eric. If she was hiding from a cop, he'll have friends in the system." He met her eyes. "So do I." The storm still screamed outside, shaking the windows. Emergency lights flickered as the generator strained. The boy looked up, alarmed, and pressed the pencil into the paper until it snapped. Eric caught the halves before they rolled. "Hey, it's okay." "See?" He handed one piece back. "2 pencils. Now. No one's going to turn the lights on unless you say..." The boy's breathing slowed. He tilted the broken tip, shading the beam wider, brighter, until it reached the page's edge. Eric watched the motion, the way the child's hand traced light as if to make it real. Somewhere beyond these walls was the reason he'd been locked away, and the answer shimmered inside that drawing. When the power flickered again, the boy whispered a single word, barely audible over the hum of the heater. "Liam." Martha looked at Eric. "You got your name?" He nodded, voice low. "Yeah. Now let's find who wanted it forgotten." Outside, the wind carried the distant, hollow moan of the frozen bay, like the sound a foghorn might make if no one was left to tend the light. By morning, the snow had turned to a hard crust. Eric's boots cracked through it as he trudged back toward the ridge. The world smelled of pine sap and diesel from the county plows that hadn't yet reached these roads. He parked the cruiser at the trailhead and cut the engine. Silence folded in. No birds. Only the slow drip of thawing icicles. The cabin looked smaller in daylight. The wind had erased his tire tracks. If he hadn't marked the route on GPS, it could have vanished. He kept his gloves on as he stepped onto the porch, camera ready. The door still sagged from where he'd pried it. He photographed the splintered frame, the padlock, the screws torn out of raw wood, outside lock, intentional confinement. Inside, the air held that faint odor of cold metal and bleach. He scanned everything the way he'd been taught. Slow pivot, eyes following invisible lines, blankets folded, crates stacked in a corner, no clutter, no trash. Someone disciplined had managed this space. On the counter, he found a notched groove in the dust, an outline where a small camera tripod had stood. Next to it, a power strip plugged into a portable battery pack. He crouched, lifted the battery. Warm. Used recently. He pulled a pen light from his pocket, tracing along the rafters. That's when he saw it. A micro camera, the lens no bigger than a button, wired neatly through the wall toward the pantry. He took photos, then used his knife to pop the casing free. A tiny SD card blinked red in the slot. Eric slipped it into an evidence envelope. "Gotcha," he murmured. The pantry shelves looked fresh-stocked, labels aligned like a store display, dates printed within the month. He checked for fingerprints with a dusting brush from his kit. Too clean. Whoever did this wore gloves. He jotted notes. External deadbolt. Camera facing bed. Recent supplies. If this had been meant as a safe room, the lock would be inside. This was something else. Containment disguised as care. His phone buzzed. Martha. "He's awake," she said. Still quiet, but calmer. He won't let go of that sketchbook. Any visitors? Only CPS intake and Dr. Hunt for psych eval. Eric. The kid panicked when a janitor opened the blinds. Started screaming like it burned. He stared at the boarded window. "Dark room conditioning, you said?" "Yeah. This is beyond fear of light. It's training. Someone taught him darkness meant safety. I'll swing by after I run something by forensics." He hung up, stepped back into the cold, and glanced toward the distant bay. Through bare branches, the line of the old lighthouse trail cut across the ridge like a scar. At Bangor PD, the evidence tech squinted at the SD card under lamplight. "Encrypted," she said. "Consumer grade, but passcoded. I'll need clearance to run a decrypt. Do it off network," Eric said. "I don't want this floating around." She looked at him. "You think this ties to that ex-deputy Mercer? The one internal affairs bounced 2 years back? Rumors say he's running private security now. Had access to surplus gear." The tech gave a low whistle. "If Mercer set this up, he knows how to ghost a trail. Then we unghost it." He left her to work. By late afternoon, Eric stopped by the hospital again. The storm had lifted to a sharp blue cascade. Sunlight bounced off the parking lot snow, harsh and white. He found Martha in pediatrics. Liam sat cross-legged on the bed, sketchbook open, drawing with a fresh set of colored pencils someone had brought from the gift shop. Eric waited in the doorway, not wanting to startle him. The boy's new picture wasn't a lighthouse this time. It was the cabin, drawn from above, roof canted, one dark rectangle for a door. A red line traced from the door outward, ending in a small stick figure. Beside it, faintly penciled words. Eric, light. Martha noticed his stare. "He started that an hour ago. Says the beam means he's not alone anymore." Eric felt his throat tighten. "That's good progress." She lowered her voice. "There's more." A volunteer here, Ms. Green, same surname as me, recognized Nora Carver's name on an old donation record. Says Nora lived up by Winter Point before it was closed to the public. "That's restricted property now. Who controls access?" "County. Maintenance, except they subcontracted security to a firm called Iron Shore." Eric frowned. Iron Shore's Mercer's company. Then your hunch just turned official, Martha said quietly. He looked back at Liam, whose pencil moved in small circles of yellow light. Each loop grew brighter, overlapping until it filled the page like sunrise. The beam again, searching, relentless. I'll need a warrant for that lighthouse trail, Eric said. I'll make the call. Martha nodded. Careful, Eric. If Mercer's covering something, he won't sit quiet. He touched the door frame. Neither will I. As he walked down the hall, his phone pinged. A message from forensics. Video file recovered. Multiple clips. Timestamps show nightly check-ins between 2300 and 0100. Subject appears to be an adult male in deputy-issue jacket. Eric stopped in the corridor. In the reflection of the window, the hospital's floodlights glared like miniature suns. Behind him, down the hall, Liam's sketchbook rustled as another page turned. Outside, daylight faded over Bangor, and far across the frozen bay, a shadow moved along the cliffs where Winter Point light had once shone. Julian Archer's loft overlooked the Penobscot like a frozen runway. Screens lined one wall, the glow reflecting off metal shelves of servers. Eric had called him because Julian was the only tech mind in Bangor he trusted, and one who owed him a favor. Julian swiveled in his chair, coffee steaming beside him. You weren't kidding about this card. Whoever set it up used a time-stamped overwrite every 72 hours. Classic surveillance loop. Can you break it? I already did. Julian tapped a key. The monitor filled with grayscale stills. Each showed the same angle. The cabin interior, Liam asleep under a blanket, the sketchbook at his side. A digital clock glowed in the corner. Eric leaned in. Advanced to 2,300. The image jumped. The door opened. A man stepped in wearing a heavy sheriff-style parka, badge glinting under a headlamp. His face stayed in shadow, but the posture was military straight. He set a tray of food on the crate, checked the blanket, and, Eric's stomach clenched, adjusted a small sensor at the foot of the bed aimed directly at the boy. Jesus, he muttered. Julian froze the frame, magnified it. Look at the sleeve patch. County Reserve Deputy, Mercer's old division. The next clip showed the man pausing, glancing toward the camera as if aware it existed. Then he lifted his hand and touched the brim of his cap, almost a salute, before the feed cut. Eric exhaled slowly. He knew he was being recorded. This was Control. Julian scrubbed through timestamps. Check this. Last entry, 48 hours ago. Same man. He leaves the door unlocked, turns to the lens, and says something. Enhance audio. Static. Then a deep, slow voice. No one takes what's mine again. The screen went black. Julian sat back. You're walking into a mess, Dalton. Wouldn't be my first. He pocketed a copy of the files and left. By dusk, the roads glittered with salt and meltwater. Eric's tires hissed along the coastal highway. Winter Point rose ahead, cliff line jagged against a bruised sky, lighthouse silhouette dark except for a single security light pulsing red over the gate. A truck idled there, exhaust curling. He parked off the shoulder, badge visible, and approached. The guard stepped out, scarf high around his jaw. Private property, no entry after hours, Bangor PD, Eric said, flashing ID. Need to speak with whoever's running Iron Shore security. That'd be Mr. Mercer. He's not here. Funny, Eric said. His truck is. The man's eyes flicked. You got a warrant? Working on it. While I wait, maybe you tell me why a 9-year-old was locked in a cabin with your company's gear. The guard's face tightened. Never heard of any kid. Eric took a step closer. Then you won't mind if I look around. The guard's radio crackled. A low voice came through, grainy but clear enough to freeze the air between them. Let him go, Tom. He'll see what he's meant to see. The guard swallowed hard, lowered his radio, and stepped back toward the booth without another word. The gate arm rose. Eric hesitated, then walked through. Gravel crunched underfoot. Beyond the fence, the lighthouse loomed, its glass lanterns shattered by years of neglect. The wind from the bay cut sharp, smelling of salt and rust. Inside the keeper's house, footprints trailed through dust. He followed them with his flashlight until it hit a wall of photo boards. Dozens of printed images pinned neatly. Nora Carver and a small boy smiling on the cliffs. Polaroids dated years apart. Then newer shots. Liam sleeping, eating, sketching. Each one tagged with times, vitals, notes in precise block letters. Subject stable. No intrusion. Light exposure limited. Eric felt the cold creep higher in his chest. This wasn't a kidnapping in panic. It was an experiment in control. Behind him, a door creaked. You're early, said a voice. He turned. Wade Mercer stood in the doorway, older than Eric remembered from academy files. Hair silvered at the temples, uniform replaced by a black tactical jacket with iron shore stitched on the sleeve. You should have waited for that warrant, Mercer said evenly. Would have saved us both paperwork. Eric kept his hand near his holster but didn't draw. You locked up a kid, Mercer. Fed him like a pet. Filmed him. Where's Nora Carver? Mercer's jaw ticked. Nora was unstable. Claimed I was dangerous. Took my son away. Your son? He smiled thinly. Liam, mine by blood. She falsified papers, hid him under another name. I found them. Fixed it. Fixed it by caging him. Mercer stepped closer, flashlight cutting across his scarred cheek. He's safe there. Away from her delusions. Away from the world's light that blinds good people. The dark teaches obedience. Eric's pulse hammered. You're delusional, Wade. The state's gonna burn you for this. I was the state, Mercer said quietly. You think your report will survive chain of command? I still have friends. He reached for a shelf. Eric's hand went to his gun, but Mercer only picked up a small handheld remote. A click echoed. Outside, the faint red security light shifted to bright white, flooding through the broken glass panes of the tower. Beautiful, isn't it? Mercer said. The beam still works. My boy loved it once. Drew it for her every day. Eric's earpiece buzzed, Julian's voice breaking through cellular static. Eric, system ping from your GPS. You're inside an active feed. He's watching from remote servers. Get out. Mercer's eyes flicked toward the ceiling camera. He won't make it far. Eric backed toward the doorway. We'll see. Then a siren cut the night. The low, rising wail of a state trooper cruiser climbing the hill. Mercer's expression shifted. First confusion, then fury. Who tipped them? Eric held up the body cam, blinking on his chest. You did. When you turned the lights on, he stepped outside. As blue strobes washed the cliff face, the lighthouse beam sliced through snow again, steady and searching. Inside the cruiser below, Liam sat in the back seat beside Martha, wrapped in a blanket, sketchbook open. He looked up at the sudden white flare cresting the cliff and began to draw, quick, sure lines of a tower rekindled. Mercer's shout echoed from the lantern room, carried by wind and sea. Eric whispered, You're not taking him back into the dark. The sirens converged on the hill. By dawn, the snow had crusted over the cliff roads, hard and glittering. Floodlights washed Winter Point, painting the frozen bay in blue and white. Troopers sealed the site, tagging evidence. Mercer stood cuffed against his own truck, face blank, the beam from the relit tower cutting across him like judgment. Eric leaned on the hood of his cruiser, fingers numb around a thermos. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that child's face under fluorescent hospital light. How Liam had drawn his way through fear. The boy's sketches had become a map, each beam pointing toward something buried deeper. A state investigator approached, badge flashing silver in the morning glare. Mercer's invoking his service record. Claims he was conducting an off-grid protection study. Eric snorted. That's a hell of a name for child confinement. Judge already signed a preliminary warrant. We're pulling every file from his security firm. You heading back to Bangor? Yeah. The kid's priority now, Pine River Medical, smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Inside pediatrics, Martha sat beside Liam's bed, reading a paperback aloud in a low, melodic voice. The boy sketched as she read. Pages of sea cliffs, gulls, and finally, a woman's silhouette framed in the lighthouse beam. He drew her again? Eric asked quietly. Martha nodded. He said the light finds her. That's all he repeats. Eric studied the outline. The hair, the posture, something maternal, protective. Any word from CPS? They'll file for emergency guardianship today. I asked to be included. He trusts familiar faces. Eric smiled tiredly. You'd make a good guardian, Martha. I'd just like to see him safe long enough to breathe, she said. What did Mercer say? Claims Nora was delusional, that she stole Liam from him. No mention of where she went. But forensics found her name on bank drafts tied to the Lighthouse Restoration Fund. Last withdrawal 5 months ago, Winter Point postmark. Martha frowned. That place was locked tight. Who signed the maintenance checks? Same name keeps showing up on everything. Daniel Reeve, listed as contractor. Fake address. Martha tilted her head. Reeve or Reed? Eric blinked. What? Nora once mentioned a friend from the Coast Guard Museum. Reed. He helped her restore the lantern glass after a storm years back. Maybe she used his name. Eric pulled out his notebook. If that's true, Mercer's story about her mental health is garbage. She was trying to keep the lighthouse functional, not hide. He glanced toward Liam, whose pencil had slowed to soft shading across the beam. And maybe she left something for him there. By afternoon, Eric drove to the county courthouse for the custody hearing. The small courtroom smelled faintly of dust and radiator heat. Judge Coleman sat at the bench, spectacles low on her nose. Mercer's attorney filed an emergency petition for paternal rights, arguing Nora's unfit flight. CPS countered with photos from the cabin, external locks, video timestamps, Liam's medical notes. Eric testified last. His voice stayed steady, but his hands curled on the rail as he described the door, the padlock, the micro camera aimed at a child's bed. Mercer stared through him, expression smooth as ice. When Eric finished, the judge adjusted her glasses. Mr. Mercer, your claim of custody cannot supersede a criminal indictment for unlawful imprisonment. The court orders Liam Carver remain under protective care pending federal review. You are remanded without bond. A faint murmur rippled through the gallery. Martha exhaled beside Eric, relief mixing with unease. Outside, the wind had risen again, cold and sharp. Reporters clustered on the courthouse steps, questions flying. Eric said nothing, just guided Martha and Liam through the side exit. The boy gripped his sketchbook tight, small shoulders hunched under his borrowed parka. In the parking lot, Eric crouched to eye level. "You did good today, buddy." Real brave Liam looked up. He said, "Mom's gone." Eric's chest tightened. "We don't know that yet." Sometimes light takes a while to reach where it's needed. The boy studied him, as if weighing that idea, then flipped open his book. On a new page, he drew a narrow streak of yellow, cutting through black ocean, thin but unbroken. Martha glanced over Eric's shoulder. "He's drawing coordinates." "What?" She pointed. "Those numbers at the base, it looks like part of a date and latitude. 44.82. That's near the old pier. North of Winter Point, Eric's pulse jumped, where the supply boats used to dock. "Think she left something there?" she asked. "Only one way to find out." He looked back at Liam. "You okay if we drive a bit?" "You can keep drawing." Liam nodded, serious. "Light knows the way." By dusk, the three of them stood at the frozen pier. The bay wind was brutal, tasting of salt and iron. Eric's flashlight beam bounced over cracked boards until it hit a half-buried locker chained to a piling. The lock was rusted, but the plate read, "Carver Marine Trust." He pried it open. Inside lay a water-sealed tin box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside that, a stack of Polaroids and a worn envelope. Martha knelt beside him, her breath visible in the cold. "Is that her handwriting?" He unfolded the note. "If you find this, the light still works. Liam is safe if it burns. Trust Officer Dalton. He helped us once before he forgot." Eric froze. His own name stared back at him. He read it again, slower. "He helped us once before he forgot." Martha whispered, "Eric, what does that mean?" He stared at the page, memory stirring. A domestic violence call years ago on a stormy night. A woman and small child he'd never located after dispatch lost the line. Same ridge, same season. "I took the call," he said softly. "I never made it there. Power lines were down. She must have thought that you left her," Martha finished. Wind howled through the broken pilings. Eric looked toward the distant lighthouse, its beam faint but alive, slicing the horizon like a pulse. "We've got to find her," he said. "If she's still out there, she deserves to know he's safe." Behind them, Liam pressed a fresh page against the hood of the cruiser. In the fading light, his pencil moved quick and certain. A tower, 2 figures at its base, and a small line of script. "He remembers." Snow fell again by nightfall, soft and relentless, frosting the courthouse dome and every squad car roof. Eric sat in his office with the letter open on his desk. A cup of cold coffee beside it. The words blurred when he stared too long. "Trust Officer Dalton. He helped us once before he forgot." He pulled the old incident logs from the archive terminal. Year 2018, late January, domestic disturbance, caller, Nora Carver. Dispatch note, child present, possible weapon, caller fled toward Winter Point. The call dropped at 22:09. The next line read, Unit 7, en route, signal lost. Unit 7 had been his. He rubbed a hand over his eyes. He remembered the night only in fragments. Ice storm, downed power lines, a detour order. A crash on Route 15 had pulled him away. By the time he reached the ridge, the cabin had gone dark. He'd written, unable to locate, and moved on. Now, 6 years later, the echo of that choice sat in his inbox, staring back at him in Nora's looping script. Martha appeared in the doorway, coat buttoned to her throat. "You didn't go home." He shook his head. "I was supposed to find her years ago." She stepped closer. "Then find her, now. You've got a name, a place, and a reason. Eric folded the letter into his pocket. You up for another drive? Always. They took the county suburban this time, packed with blankets and thermos jugs. Liam was asleep at the medical unit under CPS watch. Martha had promised she'd be back before morning. The roads toward Winter Point shimmered with thin ice. Clouds hung low, erasing stars. At the base of the ridge, Eric parked beside the closed access gate. A fresh set of tire tracks cut through the snow, newer than their last visit. State team cleared out hours ago, Martha said. Who's still up there? Eric drew his flashlight, sliding under the gate. The wind off the bay bit at his face. Inside the old keeper's house, their beams caught dust motes swirling like ash. Everything looked as they'd left it. Mercer's photo board, the remote on the shelf, except the floorboards by the desk were disturbed, prints leading toward the cellar door. Eric lifted the latch. The hinges groaned. Cold air breathed up from below. He descended first, gun drawn. The basement was small, stone-walled, with old fuel drums and coiled rope. In the center sat a steel locker identical to the one from the pier. Its lid was cracked open. Inside were flash drives, sealed envelopes, and one small flashlight wrapped in tape. On the handle, written in marker, "For Liam, when he's ready." Martha knelt beside him. She was here. This is recent. Eric examined the flash drive labels. Mercer payrolls, Iron Shore contracts, 2024. Evidence neatly compiled. She's been documenting him, he said. Probably since she disappeared. Then where is she now? A faint metallic creak answered from above. Footsteps on the floorboards. Eric motioned for silence, killed his light. Through a gap in the planks, a narrow cone of gray from the lantern room sliced across dust. A woman's voice called down, low and cautious. Eric Dalton? He looked up sharply. Nora? Silence, then the shuffle of boots. He climbed the steps, heart thudding. At the landing stood a woman wrapped in a sailor's coat, hair wind-tangled, face thin but alive. Her eyes found his and didn't waver. I didn't think you'd remember, she said. He swallowed hard. I should have found you that night. You couldn't. Mercer cut the lines and filed false reports. I ran before he could take Liam again. She held up a small device, a GPS tracker. I've been watching him through his own network. When you opened that camera feed, I saw your badge number. That's when I knew it was safe to come back. Martha exhaled. You've been hiding in plain sight. Nora nodded. Every time I turned on the light, I risked him tracing me. But Liam's drawings, they were our signal. He remembers the beam. Eric stepped closer. He's safe now. Mercer's in custody, facing federal charges. Tears welled in her wind-red eyes. Then the light did its job. Why not go to the state before now? He asked gently. Because Mercer had copies of everything. Payrolls, case files, my restraining order, all doctored. I needed proof. It's all down there. She gestured toward the basement, but there's one more piece in his office downtown. The key fob to his server vault. Eric nodded slowly. Then we finish it tonight. Nora hesitated. You don't owe me this. I do, he said. I'm the one who forgot. Back in Bangor, city lights glowed beneath a veil of falling snow. Eric parked behind the Iron Shore building, a narrow two-story of tinted glass and steel. Security tape fluttered from the doorframe, but the state investigators wouldn't return until morning. Inside, their flashlights swept across rows of monitors looping the same surveillance feeds. Forest, shoreline, the empty cabin. The hum of servers filled the silence. Nora moved with purpose, pulling a lanyard from her coat. He hid the main drive behind the floor safe. She crouched, keyed a short code. The panel slid aside, revealing a black fob stamped IS Core. She handed it to Eric. This holds every contract tying Mercer's firm to law enforcement databases. Once that data's public, his protection collapses. He pocketed it carefully. We'll log it as evidence first thing. A faint buzz drew their attention to one monitor. Feed 07, Pine River Medical. The frame showed Liam's hospital room. He was asleep, blanket tucked. The small flashlight Nora had left glowing faintly beside him, though neither of them had turned it on. Martha whispered, "How's that possible?" "Power's out on that wing." Nora smiled through tears. "Battery light. I built it for him. When he's scared, it senses movement and glows until his heart rate slows. The light listens." They stood watching as the boy rolled over, the beam steady, soft gold against the sheets. Eric lowered his voice. "When he wakes, he'll see it's never dark again." Outside, sirens drifted from downtown, units responding to the final sweep of Mercer's properties. Somewhere deep in the bay, the lighthouse kept turning its white eye through snow. The forgotten case had come full circle. A mother who never stopped signaling, a boy who never stopped drawing, and an officer learning what light was really for. The state complex in Augusta was half lit, backup generators still humming after the storm. Eric and Nora crossed the marble foyer, the wind at their backs carrying the smell of salt from the coast. He handed the evidence envelope to Investigator Hale, a woman with sharp gray eyes and a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned above her parka. "You're sure this is the full Iron Shore directory?" she asked. "Encrypted but self-contained," Eric said. "Contracts, payroll, off-the-book transfers, names of every officer Mercer paid for access." Hale weighed the fob like it might burn through her glove. "We'll secure it in evidence control. You two get some rest." Nora's laugh was low and tired. "Rest is a luxury for people not being erased." Hale studied her, then nodded once. "Point taken. We'll call when the decrypt starts." They were halfway back to Bangor when Eric's radio crackled. "Dispatch to Dalton. Be advised, Pine River medical reports, juvenile subject Liam Carver, transferred by court order to state psychiatric unit in Orono." He slammed the brakes, the Suburban fish-tailed snow spraying. "Say again?" "Transfer authorized by Judge Allen. Docket 314B. "That's not Coleman's docket." Martha's voice cut in over a second channel. "Eric, I was at the nurse's desk when they wheeled him out. Two men, plain clothes, showed Mercer's badge ID. Nora's hand clutched the dashboard. He still has people." Eric spun the wheel, turning the vehicle north. "Martha, follow them if you can. Do not engage." "They're heading toward Route 2, she said, breath sharp. "I'm right behind." 15 miles later, headlights glowed through the flurries ahead. A gray van with state plates. Eric killed his lights, closing distance until the rear doors filled his windshield. The van turned onto an old logging road. "He's not going to Orono," Nora said. "That road leads back toward the coast." Eric hit the siren once, short and hard. The van accelerated. "Hold on," he warned. The Suburban lurched over ruts, branches clawing the windows. He drew even with the driver's side, saw the man inside. Clean cut, calm, eyes fixed forward. Not troopers, contractors. He rammed the bumper. The van fishtailed, slammed into a snowbank, stopped. Eric was out before it settled, gun drawn. "Hands where I can see them!" The passenger door opened. Martha stepped out first, palms raised. "He's inside." They locked him in. Eric yanked the rear latch. Liam sat strapped to a gurney, still clutching his flashlight, its soft beam flickering as his pulse raced. "It's okay," Eric said, cutting the straps. "You're safe now." The driver tried to reach his sidearm. Nora swung the door closed on his wrist, the gun clattering into the snow. Eric cuffed both men while Martha wrapped her coat around the boy. "Transfer orders were fake," she said. "Judge, Coleman just confirmed it. Allen retired last year." Eric looked to Nora. "Mercer's network's still alive. Someone inside the courthouse forged it." Nora's face was pale in the headlights. "Then your friend in Augusta needs that fob decrypted tonight before they bury us too." At Hale's office 2 hours later, the marshal's tech team stared at cascading code on a wall of screens. "It's all here," the analyst said. Mercer had backdoor access to sealed family court databases. He could fabricate guardianship orders, transfer minors under protective relocation. Your boy was one of dozens. Nora gripped the desk. "How many are still missing?" "8," Hale said. "But this gives us jurisdiction. Federal trafficking and conspiracy." She looked at Eric. "We need Liam's testimony. His drawings, timestamps, anything that shows chronology." Eric nodded. "He remembers through art." "It's all in that sketchbook." Martha, holding Liam in the hallway, overheard. "He won't talk, but he'll draw." She knelt beside him. "Sweetheart, they need to see what happened." "Can you show them?" Liam opened the book. Page by page, he laid out his story. The cabin, the meals left by a shadowed man, the beam slicing through dark walls. Each drawing carried tiny numbers in the margins, dates and times, precise as a log. Hale whispered, "That's corroboration." "The kid kept better records than Mercer's men." Nora brushed a tear from her cheek. "He learned it from me." "We used drawings instead of journals, harder to decode." The lead analyst inserted the new data into the archive. "Cross-referencing coordinates," he said. "These match abandoned ranger cabins across 3 counties. That's where the other kids might be." Eric felt a cold rush of adrenaline. "Then we don't wait." "We move tonight." Hale met his gaze. "You're off duty, Dalton." "This is a federal op now." He hesitated, then looked toward the hallway where Liam sat under fluorescent light, the beam of his flashlight trembling but unextinguished. "Maybe," Eric said quietly, "but that light started in my county." They rolled out before midnight, 4 unmarked SUVs cutting through snow toward the inland lakes. Nora rode shotgun in Eric's car, map open on her lap. The beam from Liam's flashlight tucked against her side blinked steady with every heartbeat, guiding them through darkness. "Think they'll find the others alive?" she asked. "We're not turning the lights off till we do," he said. Somewhere beyond the frozen pines, faint and rhythmic, the Winter Point lighthouse swept its beam across the sky. Its pattern changed now, wider, slower, as if answering back. The radio hissed with overlapping voices, coordinates, unit codes, the clipped calm of professionals masking fear. Midnight painted the forest in everfrost. Eric's SUV bumped along the access road behind Hale's lead truck. Nora and Martha rode with him, Liam asleep in the back seat, his flashlight still glowing against the blanket. "4 sites in play," Hale's voice came through the headset. "Ranger posts Alpha through Delta. Dalton, you're with me on Alpha. Mercer's lieutenant, name's Boyd, was last pinged there." "Copy," Eric said. His hand flexed on the wheel. 6 years of silence, a week of storms. And now, finally, the light was aimed at the right shadows. They cut engines a quarter-mile from the cabin. The woods were so still that breath turned to fog and hung in place. Hale motioned the team forward. Snow muffled everything except the distant boom of surf. The first thing Eric saw was the faint orange pulse through boarded slats, a kerosene lamp. The second was the small silhouette inside, curled on a cot. He felt his pulse spike. Hale held up 2 fingers. Move. The team breached in a single motion. Door splintering, shouts, the metallic clatter of surprise. Boyd spun with a flashlight in one hand, a pistol in the other. Eric hit him low. The gun skidded across the floor. Hale cuffed him before he finished cursing. "Clear!" someone called. Eric turned toward the cot. A girl, maybe 8, blinked up at him through the beam. Her pupils shrank fast. She wasn't conditioned to darkness anymore. He pulled off his gloves, knelt. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe." Her whisper trembled. "Is the light back?" He smiled. "Yeah." It never left outside. More sirens climbed the ridge as other teams reported success. 2 recovered alive. 3 miners airlifted to St. Joseph's. Each voice added to a chorus that loosened something tight inside his chest. By dawn, smoke rose from the chimneys of all 4 cabins. Heaters running to thaw the rescued children. Hale stood beside her truck, face lined with exhaustion. "We've got enough evidence to indict half his company. You did good work, Dalton." Eric shook his head. "The work's hers." He nodded toward Nora, who stood on the snow-slick cliff with Liam at her side, watching the gray Atlantic. At Winter Point Light, federal vans idled at the base while technicians cataloged files. The sun climbed, through pale cloud, touching the tower's cracked glass with gold. Nora ran a gloved hand along the stone rail. "When I restored this lens, I thought it was for tourists. Turns out it was for survival." "You kept it alive through every blackout," Eric said, "even when no one believed you." She glanced at him, "And you remembered when it mattered." Below them, Martha unpacked thermoses for the agents and the children huddled near heaters. Liam crouched by the railing, sketchbook open on a fresh page. This time he drew not a single beam, but 4, each from a different tower, crossing the page until they met in the center like joined hands. He looked up. "They found the others?" Eric nodded. "All of them." Nora's eyes filled. "Then it's done." "Almost," Eric said. "Mercer still has lawyers and this network runs deeper. But the story's out now. Truth's daylight. You can't pack it away once it hits open air." Later that afternoon, the governor's press helicopter circled the point. Reporters shouted over the wind as agents led Mercer's officers, shackled and silent, down the icy path. Cameras caught everything: the ruined badge patches, the crates of seized drives, the lighthouse gleaming behind them like a witness that refused to blink. Hale gave a brief statement, careful and formal. Eric stayed back, watching from the rocks. He wasn't built for microphones. His job was making sure the light stayed on. When the crowd thinned, he found Liam sitting alone on the pier, sketching the horizon. The boy's small flashlight rested beside him, beam pale in daylight but still steady. "You ever get tired of drawing?" Eric asked. Liam shook his head. "Light changes. You have to keep up." Eric smiled. "That's good advice." From up the hill, Nora called, "We're heading inside before you both freeze." They climbed toward her, the wind whipping their coats, the lighthouse shadow stretching long behind them. For the first time in years, the keeper's house smelled of soup instead of rust. The kitchen was loud with voices, agents laughing, kids chattering, Martha fussing with mugs. Nora looked around, dazed by the simple sound of warmth. Eric poured her coffee. "Feels different when the place is full, huh?" She nodded. "It finally feels like what it was meant to be. a signal for anyone lost. Through the window, the tower's lens caught a slant of evening sun and scattered it in hundreds of shards across the snow. The light had multiplied. As darkness returned, the generators hummed and the lantern fired again, its beam sweeping wide over the Atlantic. In its rotation, it passed over each face in the house: Nora, Martha, the rescued children, Liam curled against his mother, and finally brushed across Eric, standing at the threshold with snow melting off his boots. He thought of all the nights he'd driven past this coast without looking up, never noticing that a forgotten light still turned, waiting for someone to remember. Now it had, and the dark would never have the same power again. March came to Maine like a thawed secret, slow, messy, impossible to contain. Outside the federal courthouse in Portland, the bay ice had cracked into floating sheets. Reporters clustered behind barriers, microphones pointed toward the marble steps. Inside, the corridors buzzed with the dry hum of litigation. Eric adjusted his tie in a reflection panel and felt like he was walking into another storm. "Ready?" Nora asked beside him. Her navy coat was pressed, hair neat for the first time in weeks, but her hands still trembled slightly when she smoothed the collar. "Ready enough," he said. They passed through security. In the gallery, Martha sat with Liam and two of the rescued kids. The boy's sketchbook rested on his knees. He'd drawn the courthouse front that morning, a building crowned by a thin beam of light rising from the roof, defiant against the gray. Judge Coleman, reassigned to federal oversight for this case, called the room to order. Mercer entered in shackles, flanked by U.S. Marshals. His once impeccable posture had bent, the uniform arrogance stripped away. The prosecutor began. The United States VI, Wade Mercer, concerns a conspiracy to abduct and conceal minors under color of law. The defense leaned hard on doubt. These were protective transfers. The defendant sought to shield vulnerable children from neglect. Eric's jaw tightened. He'd heard this language before, the kind that dressed abuse in duty. When Nora took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She described the years in hiding, the forged paperwork, the fear of light. Her voice didn't shake until the attorney asked why she never sought help. Because the people who were supposed to help were the ones hunting us, she said. When you live in the dark long enough, you start thinking light is a trap. The prosecutor showed one of Liam's drawings: the cabin, the clock, the thin strip of light cutting through boards. "What does this mean?" She smiled faintly. That he never stopped. Believing light could be safe again, from the gallery, a child's small hand reached into hers as she stepped down. Liam's, pale fingers gripping her sleeve. During recess, Hale found Eric by the vending machines. "You're on next," she said. "You know they'll grill you about Winterpoint. Unauthorized entry, lack of warrant." "I'll take it." She eyed him. "You might lose your badge." Better that than another file stamped "unable to locate." Back inside, the defense came at him fast. Chain of custody, vigilante conduct, grandstanding. Eric stayed even. "I followed the evidence where it led," he said. "That path happened to start at a child's locked door." The prosecutor asked what he remembered from the night of the storm. He hesitated, then spoke softly. "A boy with a sketchbook." He drew a light that shouldn't exist. Turned out he was right. We just hadn't looked for it. Coleman's gavel brought stillness. "Officer Dalton," she said, "this court recognizes initiative taken under exigent circumstances. You may step down." He exhaled, not realizing he had been holding his breath since January. That evening, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts: unlawful imprisonment, evidence tampering, child endangerment, conspiracy. Mercer showed no reaction as deputies led him away, but when the camera flashes hit, Eric saw his face flinch once, like a man staring straight into light for the first time in years. Outside, the press swarmed. Nora shielded Liam as questions flew. How does it feel? What happens now? Eric guided them through the crush to the courthouse steps. No statements tonight, he said, voice steady but firm. Justice already spoke. They reached the street where Hale waited with coffee cups steaming in the cold. You're cleared of all internal charges, she told him. Technically, you saved us 6 warrants worth of time. Technically, he said, half smiling. She shrugged. Don't push your luck. Nora looked back at the courthouse. Its facade caught the last light of sunset, stone glowing warm against the icy bay. It's strange, she murmured. All those years hiding from the light, and now it's the only thing that doesn't hurt. Eric followed her gaze. That's how you know it's real. It blinds you a little before it heals. They drove home in quiet. The road to Winter Point shimmered under stars, salt white and familiar. At the crest, the lighthouse turned slow and sure beams sweeping the sea. Martha had hung a new bronze plaque at the base. Harbor Light Center, for every child found. Inside, volunteers unpacked cots, toys, notebooks. The old keeper's house had become a shelter funded by public donations. Nora managed the front desk now. Hale handled legal coordination. Eric was back in uniform, unofficially assigned as liaison. Liam raced down the hall, waving his sketchbook. Mom! Look! On the fresh page, he'd drawn the tower not from the outside, but from inside the lantern room. His perspective, looking out over calm water, the light filled everything. Nora knelt, eyes shining. That's what home looks like, she said. Eric met her glance and saw it mirrored in her expression. Gratitude, forgiveness, something deeper that didn't need naming. The beam swung across them through the window, painting their faces gold before fading toward the horizon. In the quiet that followed, gulls cried and the ocean breathed against the rock, steady as a heartbeat. The gulls came back first. They circled the cliffs like scraps of white cloth in the salt air, diving through the updraft that rolled off the Atlantic. Below them, the Harbor Light Center stood bright against the summer grass. Fresh paint, open doors, laughter drifting through. Eric parked by the new sign carved from driftwood. A place where the light stays on. He stepped out into the clean wind, the kind that carried no sirens, only the hush of waves and children's voices. Inside, the once cold keeper's house smelled of lemon polish and chalk dust. Kids leaned over long tables drawing with crayons and watercolors. A volunteer musician played guitar in the corner, soft enough not to cover the sound of pencils scratching. Martha spotted him first. Officer Dalton, our honorary lighthouse keeper, she teased. Her hair had grown silver over the months, but her grin still made him think of coffee at midnight. You here for inspection or celebration? Both, he said. Heard there's an art show. She pointed to the stairwell. Top floor. The curator's 9 years old and refuses to hang anything crooked. He climbed the spiral steps, hearing laughter echo up the metal throat of the tower. At the lantern room, sunlight poured through spotless glass. Liam stood on a stool, arranging drawings along the circular wall, every sheet anchored by a small magnets. Ocean blues, soft grays, beams of yellow. You turned this place into a gallery, Eric said. Liam glanced over his shoulder, grinning. Mom said light should have stories. These are all the ones we found. Nora appeared from the stairs below, carrying a box of lemonade cups. You still memorize his captions? She asked Eric. He smiled. Some of them are in my patrol notes. They walked the circle together. Each drawing told a piece of the journey: the snowbound cabin, the first beam through darkness, the courthouse glowing in sunset, the day the children came home. Near the end hung one new image: a wide horizon lit by a single flare of dawn. In small, careful script, Liam had written, "Light doesn't rescue. It remembers where to look." Nora's voice softened. He came up with that on his own. Eric studied the line, heart tight. He understands more than most adults. Because he had to, she said. Then, quieter, you stayed until he didn't have to anymore. Outside, a ship's horn sounded, a deep, resonant note carrying miles. The automated beacon answered with its slow rotation, gold spilling across the bay. Eric leaned on the railing, the metal warm under his palms. I used to think this tower was just stone and gears, he said. Now it feels alive. It is, Nora said. It's everyone who refused to turn it off. Down below, Martha shepherded kids to the picnic tables. Hale arrived with 2 marshals, smiling in plain clothes, the badge tucked away. Someone set up a projector for evening. They'd watch a movie against the lighthouse wall once the sun went down. Simple, safe things, proof that the world could be ordinary again. Eric looked out toward the water. You ever think about leaving Maine? Nora shook her head. No, the light travels far enough. We just keep tending it. A pause settled between them, easy, companionable. Then she reached into her coat pocket and handed him a folded sketch. Liam wanted you to have this one. He opened it. Pencil lines, clean and sure. A man and a boy walking down a snowy road, a faint beam ahead guiding them home. Underneath, written in Liam's careful block letters, when he forgot, the light remembered. Eric folded the paper like something sacred. Tell him it works both ways. Evening crept up the sky, violet over the sea. The first stars blinked through haze as children's laughter rose with the tide. From the lantern room, the beam swept outward, gliding over rooftops, forest, and bay, its rhythm steady, patient, eternal. On the pier below, Liam pointed toward it and whispered something only the wind could carry. Nora's hand found Eric's, brief, warm, grateful. The light turned once more across their faces before spilling out to the horizon, and for the first time in years, the darkness didn't push back. The lighthouse kept its promise.